Okay, so you guys have sent in a fascinating stack of articles and videos about water,
Mm-hmm.
but not just any water cooler talk.
Right.
This is about the future of water itself
Yeah.
and
Right.
whether it'll become the next oil,
Hmm.
like a traded commodity subject to market forces.
Gotcha.
You've got a YouTube video in there that seems to have a strong take on that,
Yeah.
plus articles and research that offer some other perspectives.
Right.
So we'll dive into some arguments for and against water markets,
Mm-hmm.
explore real-world examples from Australia,
Okay.
and see how this global trend is playing out in Europe,
Interesting.
and even how it might be impacting you here in the U.S.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, look at those images in the video.
Yeah.
Those drought-stricken areas in Europe,
Right.
Australia,
Uh-huh.
really drives home the point that water scarcity is a major global issue.
It does.
2/3 of French regions
Wow.
dealing with water shortages.
Mm.
Australia, those intense droughts. Climate crisis is hitting our water supplies hard.
It is.
And that's where this whole idea of water as a commodity comes in.
Yeah.
As water becomes scarcer.
Uh-huh.
The argument is that market forces might be the best way to manage this dwindling resource.
I see.
But is that really the best solution?
Wow.
I mean, back in the 1980s,
Yeah.
the UK decided to try privatizing their water system.
Right. That was Margaret Thatcher.
Right? Bold move by her government.
For sure.
The idea was that private companies, driven by profit,
Uh-huh.
would invest in infrastructure and improve efficiency.
Yeah. Make things better.
But did it?
Well, it's interesting because
What happened?
things didn't quite turn out as planned. You know, they had those early problems.
Yeah, I'm reading about those
Yeah.
customers getting disconnected,
Yeah.
even when they couldn't afford their bills.
Right. It was a real mess.
Makes you wonder why this model hasn't been replicated anywhere else in the developed world.
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah. Were those just teething problems in the UK?
Yeah.
Or is there a fundamental flaw in privatizing such a vital resource,
Mm-hmm.
especially now with climate change adding even more pressure?
Yeah. Good point.
So that leads us to Australia,
Okay.
the poster child for how water trading works.
Interesting.
They've got this whole system with water quotas,
Yeah.
the Water Act,
Uh-huh.
mobile apps for trading.
Wow. They've gone all in on this, haven't they?
They have.
So Australia's approach is almost completely opposite to the UK's.
Right.
It's fascinating.
They've fully embraced this idea of water as a tradable commodity.
Hmm.
But it's not just a free-for-all, right?
Right.
They have a pretty complex system for allocating water rights,
Yeah.
regulating trading,
Mm-hmm.
trying to ensure some degree of fairness and sustainability.
I see.
But is it really fair?
Wow.
You've got stories about people like Bart Dohan,
Yeah.
that dairy farmer had to spend $500,000 just to buy enough water for his cows.
Right. It's tough out there for some farmers.
And then you have someone like Brendan Barry,
Mm.
the water manager focused on maximizing profits
Right.
for his shareholders.
Uh-huh.
He's prioritizing profit,
Yeah.
even if it means pushing out smaller farmers like David Owen,
Right.
who was driven into bankruptcy by those rising water prices.
It's a tough situation for sure.
The sources really highlight the human impact
Yeah.
of treating water like a commodity.
They do.
On one hand, you have people like Barry,
Mm-hmm.
who see it as an opportunity.
Right.
On the other, you have Dohan and Owen
Yeah.
struggling to survive.
It's a complex issue.
It is.
And it's not just about individual farmers either.
Right.
That's financialization of water, as some call it.
Mhm.
Could have massive societal consequences.
Right. And then you've got Wall Street
Oh, yeah.
getting interested.
Big time.
Goldman Sachs hosted that conference back in 2008.
I remember that.
Is water the next oil?
They were ahead of the curve.
They were.
And then you had those big financial institutions
Yeah.
like Citigroup publishing reports advocating for water pricing.
Right.
They saw it as a way to incentivize conservation,
Mm-hmm.
make it a more attractive investment.
So it's like they were laying the groundwork for financial instruments.
Yeah.
Like the NASDAQ Water Index,
Right.
developed by Lance Coogan and Clay Landry.
Right.
That allows investors to directly speculate on the future price of water.
Exactly.
It's a big step towards treating water just like any other commodity.
And that's what worries activists like Maud Barlow.
Right.
She's been fighting for years to have water recognized as a public trust, a basic human right.
Yeah.
And she actually had a big victory in 2010
Oh, yeah.
when the UN General Assembly voted to recognize access to water as a fundamental human right.
So that's a win for her side.
It-
But it doesn't mean the battle is over.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's a constant push and pull
Wow.
between those who see water as a commodity and those who believe it should be accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
And that's where Europe comes into the picture.
Oh,
They're emerging as a major force, pushing back against the commodification of water.
interesting. So you have Australia fully embracing the market-driven approach,
Yeah.
and Europe's trying to go in a completely different direction.
Right.
It's really interesting to see those two different approaches playing out,
It is.
and they're doing it in a very organized way over in Europe.
Uh-huh.
Grassroots movements are gaining traction,
Yeah.
like that massive right to water petition.
Right.
Almost 2 million signatures.
Wow. That's a lot of people.
It is.
That's a powerful statement.
Yeah, it forced the European Commission to take notice,
It did.
acknowledge the public's concerns about water privatization.
They couldn't ignore it.
No.
It highlights the different values at play here.
Right.
Economic efficiency
Yeah.
versus social equity.
It's a tough balance.
It is.
So we've got the UK trying out privatization early on,
Yeah.
facing some major challenges.
Right.
Australia going all in on water markets with this complex system of quotas and trading.
Right.
And then you have Europe pushing back against commodification
Yeah.
with grassroots movements and petitions.
It's a really interesting mix.
It is.
So what path will the rest of the world follow?
Yeah.
What are the potential consequences of each approach?
That's what we'll be exploring further as we continue this deep dive.
Okay, sounds good.
Let's shift our focus now to Europe.
Okay.
Take a closer look at how they're resisting this tide of water commodification.
Interesting.
It's fascinating
Yeah.
because they're not just saying no to privatization.
Uh-huh.
They're actively developing alternative models for water governance,
Right.
focusing on things like community ownership
Yeah.
and sustainable practices.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit.
Let's do it.
So Europe's facing its own water challenges with climate change.
Right.
But instead of going the privatization route
Huh.
or like full-blown water markets like Australia,
They're taking a different path.
yeah, it sounds like they're really trying to make a statement here
They are.
that water is a fundamental right, not just another asset to be bought and sold.
Yeah. And that right to water petition
Yeah.
was a major wake-up call for them.
2 million signatures.
It's a lot of people.
That's a huge number of people saying,
Yeah.
we don't want our water privatized.
They were very clear about that.
Yeah, it sent a strong message
It did.
to the European Commission that citizens were not on board
Not at all.
with those plans to liberalize water markets.
Yeah, it's a great example of how grassroots movements can really have an impact on policy.
So what have they done differently?
Wow.
Have they managed to stop water privatization altogether?
It's not that simple.
Okay.
The petition definitely put a brake on things, on the Commission's push for full-scale privatization.
Right.
But it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of debate about how best to manage water resources. So it's like this tug of war
It is.
between those who believe in the market-driven approach
Right.
and those who see water as a common good.
Yeah.
That needs to be protected.
Exactly. You've hit the nail on the head.
It seems like the stakes are only getting higher
They are.
as climate change makes water scarcity
Yeah.
a more pressing issue
For sure.
around the world.
Absolutely. As water becomes more scarce
Right.
and more valuable, that pressure to commodify it is only going to intensify.
Right.
That's why what's happening in Europe is so significant.
Yeah.
They're offering a potential alternative model, one that prioritizes social equity
Yeah.
and sustainability.
Over purely market-driven solutions.
Exactly.
So let's dive into some specifics
Okay.
about how Europe is approaching this.
Sure.
What are some of the key initiatives or policies that are shaping their water management strategies?
Well, one of the most notable things is their focus on community ownership
Okay.
and management of water resources. In many places, local communities have a much greater say in how water is distributed and used.
Compared to, say, Australia.
Right. It's a pretty radical departure from the idea of water as a commodity traded on the open market.
It is.
It's based on this principle that water is a common good
Okay.
and that it should be managed democratically in the best interests of the community as a whole.
So are there any concrete examples
Oh, yeah.
of how this is working in practice?
Absolutely. There are numerous examples
Okay.
across Europe where local communities have taken control of their water systems, implemented innovative solutions for conservation, distribution, wastewater treatment. Some communities have even established water trusts.
What's that?
They're nonprofit organizations that manage water resources for the benefit of the community.
So they're trying to create a system where water
Yeah.
is seen as the shared responsibility,
Right.
not something that can be bought and sold.
Exactly, a more holistic approach that recognizes how water is connected
Yeah.
to other social and environmental issues.
But is this community-based model scalable?
That's a good question.
Can it work on a larger scale,
Yeah.
or is it only viable in smaller communities?
It's a key question that a lot of people are grappling with.
Okay.
While there are challenges to scaling up these community-based approaches,
Right.
there's growing evidence that it can be done effectively.
Really?
We're seeing cities, even entire regions in Europe,
Okay.
exploring ways to incorporate these elements of community ownership and participation.
Into their water management strategies.
Yeah.
So it's not just about rejecting the market-driven model
Right.
altogether. It's about finding new and innovative ways to manage water that balance those economic considerations with social and environmental needs.
Exactly. Europe's showing that it's possible
Okay.
to challenge that dominant narrative of water as a commodity
Right.
and explore those alternative pathways that prioritize sustainability and equitable access for all.
Okay, so you're telling me that Europe is pushing back
Yeah.
against the commodification of water, even implementing these community-based models in some cases.
Right.
But how is this playing out in the real world? Are they actually seeing positive results?
That's what we'll dig into next.
Okay.
There are some really compelling examples
Okay.
of how these alternative approaches are making a tangible difference.
All right, let's get into it.
Okay.
So we got these two contrasting approaches, Australia embracing the market and Europe resisting it. But what does that actually look like on the ground? Are there places where these alternative models are really working?
Yeah, one of the most inspiring examples is this small town in Germany.
Okay.
They were dealing with rising water costs,
Wow.
dwindling supplies.
Right.
So they decided to take matters into their own hands.
Okay.
They formed a cooperative and bought back their water system from a private company.
Wow.
Then they implemented all these conservation measures,
Like what?
rainwater harvesting,
Right.
leak detection,
Uh-huh.
which really helped reduce water consumption.
So they took ownership and prioritized conservation
Exactly.
instead of just relying on a private company to
Right.
manage it all.
And the results were pretty impressive.
What happened?
They lowered their water bills
Okay.
and they improved the health of their local ecosystem.
Wow. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, it's a great example of how these community-led initiatives can create both economic and environmental benefits.
It makes you wonder if this community ownership thing could be like a bigger part of the solution
Yeah.
to the global water crisis.
Yeah, there's definitely a growing movement
Uh-huh.
advocating for that,
Mm-hmm.
arguing that water as a common good should be
Right.
managed democratically and sustainably.
Not for profit.
Right.
But let's be real for a second.
Sure.
There are some powerful forces out there
Yeah.
pushing for commodification.
Definitely.
We've seen how Wall Street's getting involved
Uh-huh.
with those indexes tracking water prices,
Right.
investors looking for opportunities.
It's a big business.
But, you know, that right to water petition in Europe
Yeah.
shows there's a pretty powerful counter movement too.
Yeah. There is.
Millions of people pushing back
Yeah.
against this idea of water as just another commodity.
It's not just them either.
Okay.
A lot of governments are recognizing the need
Yeah.
to protect water,
Uh-huh.
make sure everyone has access.
It feels like this is becoming a defining issue of our time.
It is.
As water scarcity intensifies, are we going to put profit first
Right.
or people?
It's a big question.
Will we manage water as a common good
Yeah.
or a commodity to be traded?
And remember what that Aboriginal elder said?
What was that?
He said, you can't eat money,
Uh-huh.
you can't drink money.
Right.
That really stuck with me.
Yeah,
His perspective reminds us that water is essential for life itself.
it is.
It's about more than economics.
Right.
It's about our survival
Yeah.
and the health of our planet.
I think we need to rethink our whole relationship with water.
I agree.
It's not just a resource to be exploited.
No.
It's the foundation of life itself.
It is.
So we've explored the financialization of water,
Yeah.
the potential consequences, and the resistance to this trend. We've looked at Australia,
Yeah.
Europe,
Uh-huh.
those community-led solutions.
Right.
But what path will we choose?
That's the question we all need to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
What role do we want to play in
Oh.
shaping the future of water?
It's a big responsibility.
It is.
Will we be passive consumers?
Right.
Or will we demand a more sustainable and equitable approach?
We've given you a lot to think about today.
We have.
Hopefully this deep dive has inspired you
Yeah.
to learn more, get involved, be part of the solution.
Because the future of water is in our hands.